Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name's Nicole and it's time for another reading wrap up. Now, in all transparency, this is the second time I'm recording this because the first time I did it, I apparently recorded it in slow motion with no volume. Anyway, that's not what you're here for. You're here for the book reviews. In theory, I have 3 books to review for you today and it's probably gonna be fast because I've already talked to you about these books. You just couldn't hear it. So yeah, here's the 3 books right here. I'm gonna just talk to you about them, I guess in the order that I read them. They were all really interesting. They were definitely all a bit dark, and some of them I liked a lot better than I thought I would. And the interesting thing about these is all 3 of these I was hoping would be 5-star reads. They weren't. I'll talk to you about that. This first book that I'm going to talk to you about is, I'm pretty sure, the lowest rated book on my physically owned TBR. Now, I don't really keep track of that, and Storygraph, the way it is set up, is intentionally not focused on the star ratings of books, but I do happen to look occasionally, and I think I got it as a prompt in a game one time, and at least as far as I could find without having to search, all of my books and re-look it up in a weird way, this one ranked the lowest. I think it's like 3.3 on the Storygraph, which is fairly low. And I would say the lowest, that's not a classic. Classics rate horribly low everywhere all the time. Anyway, let me tell you about this first book, which is The National Telepathy. And I'm going to hold it over here because I realize I'm getting like weird sunlight over here. Yeah, The National Telepathy. This is written by Roque Larraquy, I believe is how you say his name, and it is translated from Spanish. It was originally written in Spanish. He is an author from Argentina. It is published by Charco Press and came out in 2020. This is a book that honestly I picked up because I had heard of the publisher and wanted to read some of their works, and I found the book used and figured it was going to be the cheapest way to try something by this publisher, especially because it's a shorter book and I don't always like buying really short books at like really high prices. Not that this was necessarily $16.95. Yeah, it still feels like a lot. Anyway, I think it was worth it. I really enjoyed this book. It is a work of literary and historical fiction. I would say it's definitely a satire. This book is about a multitude of things, but I would say the protagonist of this book is a gentleman called Amado Dam, and he is living in 1933. He is a businessman living in Buenos Aires, and he is trying to put together a ethnographic theme park. And if that sounds problematic, yeah, no, it is. And it's a problem as well, because in order to put together this ethnographic theme park where that features in a sort of Disneyland type style indigenous people from different parts of the world, he has to first start out by shipping 19 indigenous people from the Amazonian region. Currently, these people are all working for, what kind of company was it? Oh yes, the Peruvian Rubber Company, and the owner of that company agrees to find workers and ship them, legally or not, with some artifacts to this guy so that he can feature them all in a realistic exhibit at the theme park. All he wants to do is start this theme park, but Amato runs into a lot of problems, including the racist people on his committee who just can't seem to think of a way to bring all their racist ideas together into agreement so that they can open the theme park. He is also struggling with the fact that the indigenous people don't all seem to be happy and want to be there, and to complicate matters further, if they weren't complicated enough, he also struggles with the fact that he discovers amongst the shipment of artifacts that it has also shipped a sloth. And here is the sloth on the cover of the book. And it's not just any sloth. This sloth seems to have magical powers of some sort, and those powers allow for an erotically explosive telepathic connection between people. Yes, that's right. Play that back if you need to hear what I said again. So if I'm laughing, even though so much of this book seems disturbing, it's because it's a satire, and the issues and the topics the author talks about are those that would either like just make you want to cry and feel horrible about the world, or laughs that you don't cry. And I think the brilliance of this book is he manages to tell these horrible situations with a good amount of dark humor, and yeah, it really worked for me. So the book is structured and told really interesting. It's a really unique and very different story. And in looking at other people's reviews, I think it was too much for some people. So let me tell you about the things that I liked in this book as well as the things that I didn't like, and you can decide whether or not these things would work for you. Okay, so first of all, like I said, I really liked the plot of this book. I thought it was unique. I thought it was really different, rather. But I also thought it was rather difficult to follow, and it seems like a lot of other people did as well. The structure of the book is really fascinating. It is set up in two different parts. Well, I guess really three parts. Two of the parts are the actual like story, or like the part that would easily be identified as a story, and the third part is called the appendices. But the third part of it, the appendix itself, is actually part of the story as well. In part 1 and 2, you are getting the story from multiple different people, including Amato's assistant. You're getting a letter from the Peruvian rubber company. You are also getting Amato's perspective as well. And then in the appendices, you're kind of getting documents that are referring to the outcome of different things, including a lot of what happens in part 1 and 2. And you really have to read the book as a whole and all of the appendices. And I found I had to reflect back at what happened to figure out whether or not I did actually understand the book and what happened and what was going on, and decide whether or not I liked it. I thought the writing style was very satirical. Like I said, I really enjoyed the humor that was used in here. I thought that Roque did a really good job of portraying these characters as exactly as how you think they would have behaved during this time period, while simultaneously being able to point out all the flaws and issues without directly commenting on them. I also really liked the different themes and ideas that came up in this book. I thought they were deep and personal and really had to do with local issues that I sometimes didn't know that much about, but it was done in a way that made me want to learn more. This talks about cross-cultural exchange, colonialism, class, race, gender, and how we may or may not choose to connect and identify with other people and share information and learn about others that are not like ourselves, as well as the things that may prevent us from doing so. I thought the sort of magical real or science fiction element of this book was quite a surprise, especially towards the end, and I really liked how it was incorporated. I think it's something that could possibly throw people off, and that's probably, I don't know if I would call it a downside of this book, but something to know. This is not a book that I think will be for everybody. I think some people will just remain confused about what happened in the book, and I think some people will get it and still not like it. For me, this was a 5-star read, and I was really surprised and happy to find that. I had the feeling, based on the star rating and based on what people were saying about it, that this book would go one way or the other for me. I was hoping that there was going to be more to the premise than just our crazy sloth here, and there was. I will say that if you are hoping that the sloth and what he does is a major feature of the book, you're probably going to be disappointed. The sloth does not appear in this book as a character. He's really just part of this phenomenon that kicks off a lot of different events in the plot, so do keep that in mind. He is more, honestly, almost a plot device, but not in a bad way. So those are all my thoughts for now. The National Telepathy. Feel free to ask me more questions about this book in the description box below, but it is pretty short, so I don't want to share too much about it. I would absolutely, one, read this book again, and I would definitely read more from this author. And it's made me excited about some other books that I have that are written by a few different authors that, at least premise-wise and style-wise, I think will be similar to this, and those would include Our Share of the Night, as well as Pedro Paramo. So those are the next works that I'm going to attempt. How similar they will be to this, I really don't know. That's just my guess. All right, let me move on to the next book. The next book that I read is The Necessary Beggar by Susan Palwick. This was published in 2005 and is also listed as a work of science fiction, fantasy. It's put out by Tor, so that's what they tend to publish. And like the National Telepathy, I feel like it's in a weird space of science fiction and fantasy that might just be magical realism. If it's science fiction, it's definitely soft science fiction. In both books, you're not getting any information on how systems work, that kind of thing. And yeah, The Necessary Beggar was really interesting. This was also a book that I was hoping would be a 5-star read, but I had a very different experience with this than I did with The National Telepathy. This is a story that follows the experience of a family of immigrants, and especially their granddaughter Zematrina. They have lived their entire life in this other place called Limbentuk, is that what it is? Lima Bentunk? I will put the name up on the screen. I'm not actually sure how to say that. It is an imaginary place as far as we are concerned. It does not exist in our world, and it may not necessarily exist in the world they're in or go to. Anyway, they are living in basically a sort of utopian society until one day when Uncle Doroti ends up being accused of murdering a highborn woman, at which point he is exiled from their community and must be sent through a portal to another world that is unknown to him. Because of the way of the world that they live in, his entire family, his entire extended family, in fact, decide to go into exile with him. And to their surprise, they go through basically a portal and find themselves in a refugee camp in Nevada in the United States. And things go on from there. We follow largely Zematrina, the granddaughter, her experience. She comes to the US and to Reno, Nevada when she is probably like 7 or 8, something like that, I believe. And she grows up her entire life there with memories of her previous home, as well as trying to figure out how to live a good life and be happy in her current home. However, this situation is complicated because she is very focused on trying to figure out how to make her family happy. And she decides that to do that, it means that she needs to be a good American, whatever that means, because there's a lot of confusion, understandably, about what it means to be an American. And as she tries to adjust to this new home, she finds that in order to be happy and make her family happy, there are a lot of truths that she discovers she cannot share, and a couple of secrets that she realizes she needs to hide. And the story goes on from there as her and her family try to make this adjustment. This book is definitely about an immigrant and refugee experience and about those who are in exile trying to seek asylum, in this case specifically in the US, but I think it could apply to a lot of other countries as well. This book is also about the power of charity and kindness, and really looks at like family and how we connect to one another in our family and to those outside our family, especially those that we don't know or are strangers to us. It looks at the idea of adapting as a stranger in a new land and new culture, and I thought that was handled really well. The things that I liked the most in this book, I thought the writing was really solid. I thought the characters were really good. I liked the depth that each of the characters had. I felt every member of the family was really portrayed really well, and I liked the family environment that we were in here. This definitely has a decent dynamic of being a family story as well as the story of an immigrant experience, and I liked that we had the experience of like a whole extended family, because we got to see how each member of the family, each gender, each age group, had to attempt to adapt and adjust to this new and very unexpected life, and how foreign everything felt to them. I think the aspect of the story that had it be a fantasy where they came from a different world really enlarged the topic in the conversation instead of potentially shrinking it or just making it one narrow experience. It helped make it a broader experience that even allowed you to consider the idea of feeling foreign or exiled or strange, or however you might want to put it, not just literally but also metaphorically. And I thought that was a really pleasant surprise to find in the book. There were probably two main things in this book, though, that kind of served as drawbacks for me. One, I felt the pacing in the middle of the book was kind of slow. I thought there was a really unique and sort of tragic event that started the first maybe 25% of the book off, but then it really seemed to struggle to figure out where to go from there and started to suddenly feel like it was becoming a slice of life story, which kind of makes sense based on the topic, but didn't make sense based on how the book opened and how there seemed to be a semi-urgent situation in the background. I eventually figured out why that change happened, but it just kind of made things a bit of a mismatch in terms of pacing. The other thing that I really didn't like about the book was how it ended. It kind of took a sort of cliche and preachy tone at the end. It definitely went in a religious direction that I found somewhat surprising. And I don't know. It was something that I felt like wasn't necessary, but even if it was necessary or was just something that the author chose to do, I think the problem that I had with it towards the end was it ended up kind of having a message that this belief that was being held was kind of like the correct understanding and value to have in life. And not only did I not agree with it, I also didn't find it very convincing. I felt like it unintentionally ended up making any other way of viewing life or having faith be seen as a negative, and that's something that I don't like in books. Especially once you get to the end of the book, you will realize that there is a particular religious point of view that is sort of an overarching part of this narrative, and I know that doesn't always work for some people, and in this particular case, it didn't really work for me either. I think, however, if you are interested in exploring the immigrant community or just experiencing what it would be like to be a refugee, suddenly being transported to a different country where you're seeking asylum and may or may not be welcome, this would be a really good book to read for that reason. I do think, again, it is also a very good family story and that people might like it for that reason as well. For me, it ended up being just barely a 4-star read. I was really expecting it to be a 5-star read, like I said, and I almost feel like it should be more 3.5, but I'll leave it at a 4-star. It did have a lot of things to recommend it. I would potentially read more by this author, but probably not anytime soon. This did remind me of a couple of other books that I've read. One was The Archives of Universes Unknown, as well as the book XYZ. And interestingly enough, I am finding that in all of these sort of fantasy sci-fi books that are about immigrant experiences and that kind of thing, there tends to be some sort of some sort of portal in them, or some sort of time travel or parallel universe. So I guess that just works well with the topic. I don't know, but it's something that I'm just starting to notice, and I'm on the fence about whether or not I like that. So that's it for this book. Let me move on to my final book, which is yet again another book that I was hoping was going to be a 5-star read for me. And spoiler, it was not. Only the first book that I read this week did I give 5 stars. The third book that I have here is The Diving Pool. This is a collection of 3 novellas by Yoko Ogawa. I have read The Memory Police and The Housekeeper and the Professor by her and loved both of them. So I was really hoping that I was going to love this one as well. This book explores the darker side of humanity and how we can be cruel even in small everyday actions and encounters. And I thought it was going to be pretty horrifying, and in a lot of ways it kind of was, but true to what it says on the back, innocent gestures contain a hairline crack of cruel intent, and that is how each of the stories goes in this book. So each of these 3 novellas follows a different character who is going through different things in their life, none of them necessarily horrible, and I would say most of them sort of everyday situations, whether it's just living day to day, trying to help out a family, or just life within your family. But as the books and the plots go on, and in each of them, each of these characters starts to sort of, I don't know, go to the dark side, and they start to explore their own ability to be cruel to those around them. But again, it is in small, everyday little interactions that really kind of pile up in a really terrifying way and thought. I did really like Yoko Ogawa's writing in this book, and I did expect that based on other things that I've read by her. I thought it was just as atmospheric in a lot of ways as the Memory Police, and had just as many sort of small, creepy, horrifying elements to it as the Memory Police did. However, I don't want to say that I didn't feel like it went far enough, because the people definitely went too far in some of their encounters. But I don't know. There was something in it that was just missing for me. It never really wowed me in any of the stories. I ended up giving it 3.5 in total. It was the sort of weakest book that I read this week. I just wanted to like it more than I did. I wanted more out of the stories that I got. One of the stories, I think the middle story, I actually kind of felt slow going. And I do feel like sometimes I struggle with short stories and novellas, because sometimes I just feel like, what's the point of that story? There was one in here that I felt like that. The other two, I think, felt more complete to me. But it is an interesting little book. I'm going to hang on to it for now, because I do have another work by Yoko Ogawa that I want to try, which is Mina's Matchbox. And if I like that, I will probably want to hold on to all of her works that I have, because it'll mean that 3 out of the 4 books that I own by her I really enjoy, but we'll see. I would say if you're interested in Yoko Ogawa's work and you've read nothing by her, you might want to start with The Housekeeper and The Professor if you want something that is sad but warm and beautiful, or if you want something like this that explores sort of like the darker, creepier, atmospheric side of her writing, I would go with The Memory Police. We'll see how I like Mina's Matchbox. I'm hoping that a lot of that is going to resemble The Housekeeper and The Professor, but I feel like I haven't really heard anybody talk about it, so we'll see. So that's it. These are the 3 books that I read this week. Let me know if you have read any of these. I know that most people said they haven't heard of either of these books. Maybe you haven't even heard of this one by Yoko Ogawa. I know it now has been republished and has a new cover, because I think this was originally published in 1990, but has only more recently been translated, at least into English. But of these 3, this is the one that I would definitely recommend. But like I said, it's probably not going to work for everybody. In fact, I think that's probably true of all 3 of these books. But you never know until you try, and that's how I like to think of all the books that I pick up. So that's it for me today. I hope you are having a great reading week, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!